Hello, everyone. Happy Friday once again. I am so glad to be back at the another Friday at Mom at Home, and I'm so glad to have you all here joining me. Learning so much today about our special guest, Mr. Eric Whitacre. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful conversation we're going to have today. I'm very excited about it. And Mr. Bill is joining us, so we're always glad to have Mr. Bill Hill here guiding our discussions. Eric Whitacre, Grammy Award-winning composer, conductor. We are going to be exploring much of his career, but most importantly, a visionary behind what is called the virtual choir. Over a decade ago, this was a concept he had come up with, and based upon the technology at the time, I can't even imagine what it took to create this Herculean effort. But with the recent, landscape that we are in, having a global lockdown, global pandemic, the virtual choir became almost like a beacon for people to gather. So I'm so happy to be able to explore this today and talk to Mr. Whitacre here and welcome them all to Mom at Home, and welcome to our audience today, our live audience. Please ask questions. I'll be passing them along to our guests, and enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. How are we doing today?
Hey.
Hi,
Hey, guys.
Hi, Eric. Hi, BJ. Eric, thank you so much for being here. This is, as BJ says, going to be wonderful.
Bill, BJ, it's an honor to be here, truly. And I think, do we have a full hour? Is that right?
We do.
We do.
Absolutely.
That's unreal. Okay, so we can really get into the weeds.
We can dig deep here.
I'm going to turn it over to you, gentlemen.
All right.
All right.
Thanks, BJ.
See you, BJ.
Well, Eric, I'm going to start out with the fact that you are a huge friend of NAM. And so before we dive into those weeds, I want to make sure I thank a couple of people who brought you here today. My fellow worker, Claire Krieger-Boas, reached out, and your assistant, Meg Davies, wrote right back and said, yes, yes, yes. So thanks to both of them for bringing you in today.
Oh, yeah, and also Claire. I've worked with her now twice, I believe. She's phenomenal. Yeah. So it's beautiful to be connected with her again, even though she's not with us today.
Well, we hope she's watching, but if not, she can certainly watch the recording later on. I was looking through your bio, and I think I said this to you yesterday. I don't know how I'm going to whittle this down to 1 hour because you have done so much. So viewers, I'm going to say this right now. Please go check out Eric's website, and I know BJ will post that on your Mom at Home listing, ericwhitacre.com. Just check it out. There's so much going on. So Eric, you're very highly regarded, of course, as a composer of choral and orchestral music. Yet, from what I was reading, you came to that world later while you were in college. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's very, very correct. Yeah, I grew up. I grew up in northern Nevada, and I didn't have any real exposure to classical music until I was 18 years old. So before then, I was, well, first I was really into computers. This is the early 80s, and so I learned to program. Oh, wait, I have an actual prop here. You're not going to believe this. So I bought this, and it came in this morning. You ready? Check this out.
Oh my goodness!
In the box. In the box, a Commodore 64. So it's the first computer that I ever programmed on. I learned to program the basic language. And for those computer nerds out there, 64 and the Commodore 64 stands for 64K, right? That's how much RAM this thing had. You couldn't even open an email on it now. And so that was my first real love, was computers. And through computers, then I discovered computer music. So bands like Kraftwerk and Tangerine Dream, and then Jean-Michel Jarre and Kitaro and Vangelis, and then finally Depeche Mode and the Pet Shop Boys. And by the time I was 14, I was taking every nickel I had saved from cutting lawns or working at the pizza place and buying my first synthesizer, my first drum machine. And I spent all of high school just writing hundreds of 80s pop songs, and I guess film music without films, I don't, just these kind of excursions with electronics. And so when I was 18, not reading music at all, I did all of that playing by ear. I went to college and I joined the choir, and that was it. My life was utterly transformed. And then over a 7-year undergraduate degree, I learned how to read music and started composing for choir.
Wow. So all the music you were putting together before, the techno and the film score without film, that was all out of your head. No music, no notation involved in that. Is
That's
that
right.
correct?
Yeah, that's right. And it's funny, even, I've gone on to get a master's degree now, and I read music pretty well, I think, but I still don't think in those terms when I'm composing. I still rely, I'd say 99% on my ear. And even the process of, I still write paper and pencil, and I do it the old fashioned way. And still just the process of getting it out of my heart and my head onto the page, I just find excruciating.
Mm-hmm.
It feels very unnatural to me.
Now, when you're doing that, have you ever had an instance where you've got it in your head and you start to put it down on paper, and then maybe halfway through the stream you lose where you were, and you think,
Yes.
darn it, why didn't I just put that in the computer right off the bat?
Yeah, so I did that once, I think, and then now what I do is I play these epically long iPhone voice memos. So I'll sit down, and so that way I can record everything that's happening. It'll be like 2.5 hours long, and then I can go, okay, wait a minute, I know there was a thing back there, and then go back. What did I do? Great. But yeah, I had that happen once, and then never
you go.
again.
Lesson learned, right? There's that technology
Yeah,
thing
truly.
we were talking about. We'll get into later on, but how much technology helps us these days for what it is we do, right? Composing,
Yeah.
arranging. So when you do notate, are you using one of the computer notation programs then to get everything down?
No, I mean, I truly use pencil and paper. Wow. And so what I'll do, sometimes depending on the piece, I'll write it pencil paper first, and then if I'm behind the deadline, which is more often than not, what I'll usually do is I just take pictures of my manuscript and send them to an engraver.
Got it.
And then he puts it in Finale, sends it back to me. I check it all up. But if I'm really under the gun, then I'll do all the notation. I'll take it from the paper and I'll do it myself. Just send him the notes. Then he cleans it all up and then sends it back. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, but I never use it for composing. Actually, okay. For me, I learned early on that I thought about music differently when I was using a notation program. And part of it, I don't know how into the weeds we want to get with this, Bill, but part of it was that I studied with a man named, there's me with a pencil and paper. I look so serious, don't I?
Dude,
I'm writing the heck out of those notes. Look at that.
There's quarter notes and there's eighth notes.
Exactly. More I'm thinking, what am I doing? I don't know. So I studied when I was at the Juilliard School where I did my master's. I studied with a man named John Corigliano, and John was incredibly influential in a number of different ways about the way I thought about music. And one of them was that I remember him telling me that, I think now he's nearly 80, if he's not 80. And so he's writing a generation before me. So of course it's all pencil and paper.
Right, yeah.
And he said that, now with notation programs, it's so easy to cut and paste. It's and he said in his day, I'll never forget this, that cut and paste actually meant cut and paste.
Oh my Lord.
So that means if you want something repeated, you're going to write it out 14 times, or you're actually going to take scissors and tape and move it from here to here. And the idea was it's a pain. It's a real pain to write that way. And so before you put it down, you really think about it. You play it through in your head. You try to get a feeling for it in your imagination. And then you take all the trouble to do that thing once you've decided that's the thing. And I know for myself, when I'm working with a notation program, the ease of some of it sometimes keeps me from considering as deeply as I might otherwise what I'm really about to do and the ramifications for the entire piece. Okay. So I'm still a pencil and paper guy.
And that's interesting that you're sort of giving the yin and yang of computer notation programs, because they do make things easier and quicker, but you are right on the money when you say you might skirt past some ideas that might be even stronger than what you were working on had you been doing it the old-fashioned way with the pencil and paper.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there's pluses and minuses to using samples so that you can hear them back. And this is coming from a guy who has an actual sample library of my choir. You can buy this. So it's not that I am anti-samples, but one of the things that I've discovered over and over is that when I mock up my scores so that I can hear them back, no matter how well I mock them up, they're always, I find them to be not as accurate as I want them to be. In that, you might write the flute in a low register, and because of the nature of samples and the way you're listening to it, sounds fine. You can actually hear it cut right through through the texture. And you get in front of a full orchestra, and there's 60 strings, and then this poor flute player over there, they don't have a chance. And you don't think about that until you're, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
until you're over there. And I also, it's the same thing like when you're looking at say Logic Pro, and say you write an English horn line, and then you double it, let's say, with the solo cello.
Right.
And they're right next to each other, and they sound terrific doubled together. And it's not until you're on the podium that you realize, okay, my first cellist is right there, he's playing that line.
Right.
And my English horn is 75 feet away, and she's playing that line.
Okay.
And now it doesn't necessarily blend the way that it did with these beautiful samples right up close, and you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so I found myself over and over writing for the samples and not for an actual group of people in a big room. And so I've tried to wean myself off that as much as I possibly can.
Okay, very interesting. True confession, I do the same thing, because you hear them right there in your speakers, and it's like, yeah, that sounds tremendous, those two together. I had never really even thought that through. If it's being played by a real live orchestra, those musicians may be 50, 60 feet apart, who knows? And then it's not going to be the same blend. Interesting that you bring that up, because another thing that, for me anyway, and maybe for you as well, it's kind of a wrestling match. With samples, you can write things that are technically not playable or out of the range of the instrument.
Yeah.
What's the right way to go, right? Do you say, well, I've got this capability now, why not take advantage of it? Or do you stay true to what the actual orchestra players would be able to do?
It's a really good question. I think it depends on what the end what the end product is you're making, right? So for instance, I worked on some film scores with Hans Zimmer.
Right.
And Hans treats the orchestra, it's like a robot orchestra. So he's got these horn samples, and he plays a chord, and not only is it 24 sampled horns, which you're never going to see 24 horns, right? But you play a triad, and each of the notes is being played by 24 different players, right? Because it's a sample. So, you just have this sound that you will never achieve.
Right.
The thing is, though, it's for film score. Hans isn't writing for the concert world. He's not writing a blueprint document that can be recreated by orchestras around the world. He has one goal, and that's to get these things coming out of the speakers and sound as good as possible. And so in that world, his version of an orchestra, it's fantastic to use the samples and whatever weird hybrid version to take them out of the register or mix them, whatever you need to do. I think what I'm talking about specifically is when you're writing concert music that's got to come off the page and sparkle.
And be played by the live orchestra.
Yeah, and by real human beings, right? Because you can, with samples, like you said, out of the register, you can also do things where you just make insane leaps. Like if you're the horns, you can be up on a high D flat or something, and then the very next moment drop 2 octaves. No horn player in the world is going to talk to you after you write something like that and make them do that.
You mean after they're done throwing their horn at you for writing that line?
Exactly.
It's interesting you bring up Hans Zimmer, because one of our good friends at the museum, Rick Schmidt, is a pedal steel guitarist, and he was one of our guests here on Mom at Home. And he got the call to go in for a Zimmer session where I believe there were a dozen pedal steel players. And what he had written for them was basically you're hovering your bar on one note, unison, across these 12 steels, and you got this really ethereal, otherworldly sound, which, as you say, is not something that you would ever really hear. You don't go to a bar and hear 12 steel players playing. But the effect that he was going for was in a Superman movie in this real, I think it was like a cold ice cave or something like that. So
how cool. This is, I could go on and on about working with Hans, but one of his many geniuses is this way of looking at new ways of coming up with sound. That he just thinks differently about it, and he's always looking for another way to create something new and fresh. There's this great sound if you ever see Sherlock Holmes. And so there's a gypsy band in there, which already is such an interesting choice. He's got this an actual gypsy band playing, but there's this kind of thump that comes back. It's and what is this thing? So I asked him, how did you make this sound? And basically what they did is they went to an abandoned parking garage in Los Angeles at 2 a.m. and then lifted as high as they possibly could an old player piano and then dropped it from about 20 feet and recorded it all the way down. And so when you hear this thing, it's you can't help but be transported somewhere. It's just a unique way of looking at sound design and bringing the audience further into the film. I just think he's brilliant.
That is brilliant, and that's a great description, sound design, because that really is something that probably not many of us would think about, dropping a player piano from 20 feet. You are designing a sound that you are otherwise normally not going to hear out of that or any other instrument.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's like I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. What were you about to say?
Well, there's a great Tommy Tedesco, where he was doing a session, and Mike Nesmith was the arranger, and he said, all right, at the end, I want you all to just go crazy, play whatever you want. And the legit players were having trouble wrapping their heads around that, because it's not notes on the paper, it's just do whatever.
Yeah.
After a few takes, he wasn't getting it, and Tommy said, okay, and he turned his guitar up to 11 or 12, whatever it was, hit all his pedals, and when it came time, he just threw the guitar up in the air and hit the ground, and Mike Nesmith said, that's the sound I want. Fortunately, they got the take, because that was the end of that guitar.
Amazing.
So, Eric, let's go back to where you started writing choral pieces, because what your website indicated was when you sang the Mozart Requiem. That was the light bulb moment from you. And then you wrote your first choral piece, Go Lovely Rose, which I listened to, and I encourage everybody watching to listen to that. It's stunning. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
At that point now, I don't believe you had formally studied composition. Did you just have an innate sense of what would work for the singing voice, or was there some trial and error as you put this together?
It's an interesting question. I guess I'd started studying composition, but not really, and I can't think of a single thing I would have learned that would have gone into the writing of Go Lovely Rose.
Right.
Basically, what had happened, the story behind it is that this man, David Weiler, he was the director of choral studies at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, where I did my bachelor's degree, and he's still there. And he had this tradition that every year he would do a different musical setting of this same poem, Go Lovely Rose. And this had been handed down from his high school choir teacher. Just a really beautiful tradition. And I think that at the time there were maybe 5 or 6 of them that existed, and he would just cycle through them each year, a different one.
Right.
And so my major impetus for writing it was that I wanted to give him this gift. I wanted him to have his own version of it. And just to put a pin in that, this has served me well year after year, that when I'm writing for someone, to honor someone, to give someone something, I just think the music is better somehow. Yeah. And so this very first piece, I knew what I loved to do when I sang in choir. I knew I love these close harmonies, and I'm not a great singer, and so I think Go Lovely Rose started a whole career of writing lines that are mostly performed by mortals like me, and not not superhero singers like my wife, and so I can actually say, looking back now, 30 years, it's been 30 years since I wrote that piece. It's odd to me now that I know music and I know how to conduct, and that it's eerily formed for a first piece. I don't know either if I just had a sense of how to make this thing. It was almost like, oh yeah, this is just my name. This is how or if I just have one trick and I've just been doing it over and over for the 30 years. But yeah, that was it. And I have to say, that moment, I didn't ever even expect us to perform it. I just gave it to him as a gift, and then he handed it out. We read through it in choir, and hearing notes that I had. It's more than notes. Hearing myself in the air brought to life, in the lungs and the body and the hearts of my colleagues and my friends. That's the day I knew. I didn't know how I was going to do that, but that's when I knew my vocation. Right. This is my calling. Right. So it was a singular and seminal experience for me.
Emotionally, when you heard your music being performed by these singers. How are you feeling inside? What did that do to you transformatively?
What's interesting is it's the same feeling that I still get, which
great.
is
Good.
it's not nice. it's there's the movie version of it, where I hear, this is me on the page, and then there's the reality, which is it's profoundly vulnerable. I know of nothing else in my life where I feel so naked and just I'm aware of every tiny breath that is out of place and every badly written gesture, and it's just an incredibly intense experience. It's like standing in front of a group of people and telling them your deepest secrets.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember that too. It's just an out-of-body experience.
It is.
Yeah.
And going back to you talking about, gee, I'm not sure where it came from. I feel very strongly, and I'm not going to go down a real deep spiritual path here, but it definitely comes from somewhere out there. And I think we are the conduits. And I know you've had this experience. I have, where you're sitting down, maybe you're just going to noodle around on your guitar, and all of a sudden this thing pops out of nowhere.
Yep.
You weren't thinking of writing, but there it is. So I know there's cosmos involved there, and that's as deep as I'll go. But now, you were talking about you love these close harmonies, and as I listen to your music, even as far back as that first composition, you have a very ethereal, sort of cosmic sense, and you take this dissonance and you weave it in, and then just at the right moment, you know how to open it up and bring it back to that, okay, resolution. What's your advice for, say, a budding young composer who wanted to, or doesn't have to be young, a budding composer who wants to incorporate dissonance? What, like your
Specifically, how to incorporate dissonance.
how
That's
much, how
really
little, what's the approach?
Well, I'll tell you. So if I can just go on a bit of a safari here, Bill,
Please,
and then
please do.
I promise I'll get back to the point. But so it's funny with the dissonances. The very beginning of Go Lovely Rose, I've got a little keyboard sitting in front of me, is just simply just this little Lydian chord, right? Which on the piano doesn't sound great, but right with voices is just honey and butter. And it was born out of a bigger meta idea, which is that the entire choir starts on the same note in unison in B. This is unusual, actually, for mixed choirs with high voices and low voices to start on the same note.
The actual same note, no octave.
That's right. No octaves.
Unison.
That's right.
Wow,
That's
okay.
kind of unusual. And so then they just peel off. Right? So if you're the tenor, you're going to sing up, you just hold that second and it just peels away. Now, what I knew at the time was that there was this combination of notes made me feel something. I'm not sure what it was, other than the best I could do looking back on it now is probably some version of nostalgia. And I'm not a religious person, but it's as close as I get to being religious, because for me, the film is my temple, the cinema is my temple, and throughout the 80s, that, right, that like everybody was using that sharp 4, and I think I probably picked it up from film and equated that with this. Anyway, whatever it was, it made me feel. And so I wrote that. And also this little gesture of peeling away like this, I still do to this day, because it allows, like I said, singers who are mortals like me. If I had to be the tritone and just jump into that tritone, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But if I just have to go da, 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 and hold that note, that I can do.
Yeah.
And so it's a very pragmatic approach. All right, so still on our safari. The next piece I wrote was a piece called Cloudburst. And Cloudburst, initially I wrote the same chord, different key, but it went. So we started on a major triad, we broke apart, we still get that sharp 4, right? And the words were La Lluvia, which means the rain. And then one night while I was composing, literally my thumb slipped, and I accidentally added the 7th I played. Right?
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly, right? And I had that same feeling. I went like this. And what I realized for me was that combination of notes then sounded exactly the way I felt about the phenomenon of a cloudburst. this mystery and majesty and wonder of water and rain and the natural world. And I know now, even as I say it out loud and put it into English words, it kind of ossifies it and becomes something else.
Yeah.
But there's that emotion that exists there in this pure form, and this matches that. Yeah. And so then, for me, writing dissonances, now I promise I'm getting to your point, Bill, is the only reason to ever use them is because they're eliciting an emotional icon, like a symbol that will reach across this abyss to another person and have them feel the same thing, so that you can instill in them the sense of wonder of water and rain. Does that answer your question? Anyway,
Yeah.
So when and where to use it? In general, I would say use it as much as you like, but please know that at least the way I use it, it's never ever about hot chords. It's never about, ooh, push and pull and ooh, that feels. It's always has to have deep personal meaning. Find the combination of notes that has deep personal meaning, and then take the audience and the performers on that emotional journey.
Yeah. Wow. And you hearken to the raised fourth, the Lydian scale. When I first heard that in college, it was life-changing for me, because to me, the tension that's created by that root third and then raised fourth, I think we innately hear it wanting to go up that half step to the fifth. But when you tease with that.
Yeah, or better yet, you put like you said, the suspension and the resolution at the same time.
Yeah.
It always feels to me like it's standing still and moving at the speed of light at the same time.
Yeah.
It's just sitting there shimmering and humming. And there's something so deeply spiritual about that experience. I don't know what that is. I'll tell you too, as a tiny side note, I realized years and years later that combination of notes for cloudburst. So in college, I did a lot of transcendental meditation. So I would have been home, and I would have spent a lot of time doing this. And only years later did I realize that my voice is lower now, but then this D would have been a nice low note for me. And if you're resonating that in your body and in your head, that if you play the harmonic overtone series above that D, you get...
There it is right
It's
there.
just the third through the 10th partial.
Yeah.
So I have a feeling that what I was connecting with was actually this sound that had been vibrating in my body and my head through meditation.
Yeah.
Like this little window to this other world had been opened by doing that.
Wow, and at the time, you had no idea that was going to be the outcome. You were doing the meditation and training your mind.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just sort of opening myself to the sound of the natural world, I suppose. It's funny when you're young, you have no idea what you're doing at all, right? And so you just throw yourself into things, and years later you realize, well, that led me down the path, or
Right.
I mean, or nope.
Want to close that door and turn the lock. I call them happy accidents. So many of them are. Like you say, your thumb slipped. That happened to me one night when I was doing a little guitar riff. I went to the wrong fret, and I went, wait, no, that's not the wrong fret. And all of a sudden it became a song. It's fascinating.
By the way, I have a half-baked theory about that it's actually not an accident at all. I'm sure you feel the same way too.
Sure. Yeah.
But my half-baked theory is that there's this big mind that is endlessly trying to communicate with the small mind, which is the mind that we move through the world with each day.
Yeah.
And occasionally the big mind introduces an idea like that, even in the guise of an accident, so that the small mind can take credit for it. But it's actually the big mind saying, this is the path. Yeah. Just go this way. Just
trust me, follow me.
Trust me, that's right.
Follow me, Luke.
Yeah, you'll figure it out later, but this is the way.
Amen. So let's kind of work our way into the virtual choir world. It was 2010, I believe. So as BJ said, a little over 10 years ago. Now, what I understand from reading your bio is that you actually received a video recording from a young soprano, and she was singing one of the parts from one of your compositions, and that kind of sparked the idea.
That's it.
Can you flesh that out a bit for us?
Yeah, this was back in 2009, and when I first saw this video, and it was a young woman named Britlin Losey. She was 17 at the time. Okay. She's 29 now, and she was in Long Island, and she just uploaded a fan video to me. And what she'd done is she had sung in her high school choir a piece that I'd written called Sleep.
Okay.
And so you see in the video, she's looking right in the camera. She says, "Hi, Mr. Whitacre. My name is Britlin, and I'm a big fan." It's very sweet and innocent. And then she says, "And here's something I'd like to make for you, me singing Sleep." And then she pushes play on a CD player, and then over 5 minutes just sings from memory the top line, the soprano line, to this CD. And, you know, back in 2009, we weren't all entirely sure what YouTube was going to be.
Sure.
Remember this?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, and especially the whole selfie culture now. Everybody has cameras and lights, and they talk right to the camera.
Yep.
But back then, it was really it was striking to see somebody look straight into the camera across this huge gulf, and talk directly to you. And I was really moved by her video, and it wasn't just the purity of her voice. I mean, you can hear it now on YouTube. It's very beautiful and sweet and clear, but also the purity of the intention. That she just wanted to make this thing and upload it to somehow connect with me and say, I thank you. It's just beautiful. It's just pure. And watching that video at the time, I just had a very simple idea. I mean, it was beyond simple. It was, what if I could get 25 people to do what Britlin is doing?
Right.
That if they just sing the same piece, they could sing soprano, alto, tenor, bass. And if you sing at the same speed, the same tempo, and the same key, then honest to God, my big idea was, okay, everybody, just upload your part to YouTube, and then I'm going to open them all in different browser tabs, and then try to click play as fast as I can. This is my big idea. And I just had this sense that, a choir would have to emerge, right? And I swear it didn't go any further than that. I wasn't thinking about the symbolism or poetry or trying to bring people together. It was like a 5-year-old with Tinker Toys and saying, you know, if I put that there and that there and that there, and then push the power button, this thing should make a Ferris wheel, right? It was that simple. And so I put the call out on my website, and people uploaded videos. I wasn't expecting it. And I had to stumble around. People at first said, "How are we all going to sing in the same tempo?" And then I realized, oh God, I better make a conductor video. So I uploaded this conductor video, conducting in silence, by the way, because there's no music. You know, so I'm just imagining this piece in my head. And when people uploaded their videos, we took them, and I say we, but this young man named Scott Haynes kind of emerged from the crowd, and he edited them all together. And it took him a long time. That first one probably took 3 months for him to edit 185 singers from 12 countries together. And it's not just the video, the visuals, it's the sound, right? Because you can hear, the easy stuff is air conditioning noise or fan noise. You can EQ that out pretty easily, but you know, you could hear crickets in the background. Some of them are, there's one where you can hear the kid's mom yelling at him, you know, "What are you doing?" And so all that had to be really carefully mixed. And the night before we uploaded to YouTube, he sent me the final version of it. And I remember looking at it on my laptop and thinking, oh my God, this is so much bigger than I thought it was.
Right.
You because you see the poetry of it, all these disparate faces coming together to simply be part of something larger than themselves. And that it actually worked, that it's not only sounded like music, but you somehow recreated the community that happens when you sing together in a traditional choir. It was just I was flabbergasted. Still, when I uploaded it, I honestly thought no one would watch this.
Really?
You know, just me and my other fellow choir geeks.
Right.
And then it went viral and got picked up by the national news, and then we were off to the races.
Off to the races. So is it safe to say you were pretty much the one who spearheaded? I mean, obviously today, many people do their versions of this. But was that kind of your baby from the get-go, and you spread out?
Yeah, I guess so. It's weird to think that I started a genre, but I didn't do it intentionally. That's for dang sure. And I'll tell you, I've got mixed feelings about it now. You know, that this latest one, which I'm imagining we'll talk about, but, you know, I had over 17,000 singers.
Right.
And it's such a beautiful way to bring together a community. The virtues of the virtual choir is that it is inclusive to all kinds of people who normally couldn't be in a choir.
Right.
You know, you have the latest one had over 24 blind singers. They downloaded Braille sheet music.
Braille sheet music,
And
wow.
printed them on Braille printers and were able to join. There's over a dozen deaf signers, so people not singing, but sign language. And then there's even a really robust community of cystic fibrosis singers who, because of the strange nature of their disease, can never be in the same room at the same time in real life.
Wow,
If they transmit bacteria to each other, it can be fatal. So the only way they can sing together is virtually.
Wow.
And it's just beautiful. It's okay. So all of that being said, the mixed bag for me is that there are now politicians and school administrators who are looking at all these virtual choirs and orchestras and bands that are being made and saying, you know, when we get back together post-COVID, we can do it this way. We don't even have to have choir at school. We'll do it this way.
Wow.
And this is concerning to me because I can't shout it from the rooftops loudly enough that while these virtual choirs are beautiful and important, they are not the same thing as being together in a room full of people. I think that's just important to say that out loud.
I'm glad you did, because you're absolutely right. They are now a part of the fabric, but certainly not meant to replace the
No.
live interaction. The live
That's
choir.
exactly right.
Yeah. But it's just, I mean, I love stories like this where somebody such as yourself says, wow, this sounds fun. I think I'll give this a try, with no really grand illusions or intentions other than I want to create this project. And all of a sudden, as you say, as you've seen, it's global. And you talk about uniting the community. I mean, what you've done, Eric, really is uniting the global community. And that's not too many of us can say we've done that. So.
I mean, well, I thank you. I can't really take any credit for it because I have to say it's. I mean, first there's an insane team that's behind the scenes working to make all of these things. Now the latest one had a good 20 people working full time on it.
Right. Yeah.
But also there's this. Well, I know, speaking to both of you, you know exactly what I'm talking about. There's this inherent spark that musicians seem to have where it just simply transcends race and creed and color and politics and boundaries. It's just, you know, like, okay, just grab your drumsticks and let's play.
Yeah,
Like, let's just make music, you know, and everything strips away in that moment and you're just unified by making music together. It's very simple. And so at best, I would say in this very little corner of my world, I unlocked a thing that was already there and just gave a voice for people to come and do what they were already going to be doing.
Right, yeah. And again, possible because of today's technology, something you couldn't have done, say, 30, 40 years ago.
No, I mean, actually couldn't have even done really 15 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It just was at the cusp of it. What's phenomenal now is this latest one, which was so big, how many people are using their phones? I'd say 40% of the people who uploaded used their phone. And because of COVID times, a lot of people in their cars because it's the only quiet place they could find because everyone's at home, right? But the sound and video quality compared to 11 years ago is unreal.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like everybody's carrying around a little TV studio in their hand. You know,
Right.
it's so crazy, which makes me think in 10 years, what will we be looking at? I really can't imagine.
I'm not doing the chip in my wrist. I'm gonna say that right now. I'll be holding on to my iPhone 11. Go, nope, this is how I'm gonna do it. You know, and I'm really fascinated by the editing technology, in the sense that, as you're saying, you get videos with air conditioner noise, dogs barking, crickets. Not only do you need to somehow EQ that out, but everybody's actual vocal EQ is going to be different. Are you involved in this process, or is it strictly?
Yeah, I definitely oversee it, but there's a team of sound guys and women who are phenomenal, right? And they know what they're doing. The funny thing is, though, that I get a lot of emails now from people who are making their own virtual choirs, and they're saying, what is your secret to getting that blend? Like you ask, how do you mix it? How do you, with each individual voice? Right. And I write them always back the same thing, which is you have it way, way harder than we do. Because most people are making choirs with 20, 30, 40, 50 people in them.
Right.
And when the group is that small, you can really hear the individual voices.
Yeah.
But we have the advantage of, like, our latest one had 7,000 sopranos in it. So this thing happens, the more masked voices you get, and it only works with voices. I'm always joking with people who want me to make a concert a virtual concert band that oboes do not scale. But sopranos, you like the more you add on, it's like being at a football game, right? Where 60,000 people are singing in unison, and you know that not everybody's singing perfectly, but it really smooths out the rough edges. And so we can just throw up 100 random sopranos at a time, just make sure they're all singing at the same time, and then it's pretty good. It's pretty mixed, and you set that apart, a little bit of fix, and you do that 60 times or 70 times, so you've got all these batches, and then you throw those up together, and you're actually getting pretty close.
Wow.
So we have a big advantage that way.
It kind of EQs itself out with the numbers.
That's exactly right.
Right.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to jump in.
Jump in, BJ.
As I was watching this today, just the sheer number of people, I'm like, I had like an epiphany moment where I'm like, how many voices does it take to create like the voice of humanity, the voice of what we all collectively sound like? I'm like, this would be it. If I could imagine like what every person in the world, like just how we strip away everything, the nuances of my identity and the nuances of that, and just the human voice, I'm like, this is what it would sound like. And I'm like, I just had that real, and again, you made me cry, Eric. I appreciate it when I was watching. It's like, you got me again, man. But I just had that moment where I'm like, this is the voice of humanity. This is what humanity sounds like. These are what people sound like. When you in one voice, and it just blew my mind in that moment. I'm sorry, I'm taking a tangent off the EQing and all the technical stuff, but that surreal, just what am I listening to? And it's just everyone, you just hear everyone in that moment. Like, this is what we sound like. This is what we sound like. So again, I just wanted to point that out because that was an amazing moment, personal moment watching this, and just taking that back with me. I'm like, wow, this exists. This is a thing. This is
That's beautiful.
what it is to be a human. So I'm gonna drop back again and let you guys continue on the EQing saga. But this is that was a revelation, and I appreciate it. So thanks.
Thank you. I'll tell you, BJ, like the part of I've thought a lot about this, about what that sound is, because it's not just singers all singing the same notes, and this is where I'll get super Californian, is that I actually think you can hear and feel the intention, the shared intention. And with this latest virtual choir, you have 129 countries represented, right? Every race, creed, color imaginable. As old as, I think in this one, there were singers as young as 5 and as old as 101. I can't remember but it spans every possible kind of person on earth. And everybody's coming together to simply do that thing, which is to be part of something larger than themselves, simply to make something beautiful. And I do believe that there's this collective intention that gets captured in these virtual choirs that's more than just the music, even just more than the sound. And I think that might be what you're responding to, BJ, is just you feel it in your bones.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like playing drums in a drum circle. You could have 5 people, but the more you add to the collective consciousness of making music, the activity, the more it just becomes I don't know how to describe it other than it's just a connection. It's just making a connection, and I think that is the point for me sometimes, is just to be part of that action and be part of that essence.
I think that's the whole point, actually. I think that we transcend our individual selves and join the tribe, and it's in that moment that we realize our best selves.
Yes, and BJ Connection's the perfect word right there. We're all connecting together at the same time for the same goal, and that is to make this beautiful music. We leave the rest of it behind. Yeah, leave your cares and your worries behind and jump in there and make music. Gosh, so many roads to go down here. One of the things that I found curious watching your videos, because as you said, the latest one is over 17,000 voices. A couple of questions. Have some of your videos helped singers launch their careers? And do you receive audition videos from established professionals? Because I know the everyday person is sending you videos to be involved, but perhaps some professionals as well.
Yeah, actually, there are some pretty phenomenal singers who have joined. It's funny though, you mentioned the word audition. So unless occasionally in one of the pieces, not in this latest one, but occasionally there's a solo line. And for those, we'll have auditions. But for the regular choir, every single person gets in. All you have to do is submit a video. There's no audition. That's really important to us, that everybody is, and about launching the career, you know, there must be people who are now out. I mean, over the years, we've had over 35,000 people join these virtual choirs. So there must be somebody out there who's really doing it. I know in our very first virtual choir, there's a young woman who sang the solo named Melody Myers. She's from Tennessee.
Okay.
And she's, I think, had a pretty interesting career afterwards. She got noticed for her voice. And I mean, she just has a phenomenally beautiful voice. So yeah, that might be an example of someone.
Great.
What's also interesting, you know, once you have a group of people this big, is I often joke that if the virtual choir were to crash land on a desert island, we'd be just fine, because you have every possible discipline. Do you know what I mean? You've got doctors and lawyers and police women and you know, you just got the whole rainbow of society is in there. And we've had people who met randomly and gotten married. They saw their squares next to each other and then kind of reached out to each other, and they're married now.
Well, there's another unintended consequence of what you have put together.
I'd be curious to know how many people, like, this would be maybe their first experience performing with others, quote unquote, with others, because maybe there's something, you know, preventing them from doing it in their own personal lives, that this has given them the opportunity to be a performer for the first time. I'd really love to kind of discover those experiences. You know, I don't know. Go ahead. That's the end of my thought.
No, I was just going to say we actually hear that story quite a bit. You know, sometimes people are joining the choir for the very first time. A lot of times we encounter people who are told they can't sing, that they're tone deaf. And it's a funny thing, because usually that's a single person that told them at some point in their life that they can't sing. Usually it's when they're young, you know, they're 5 or 6 years old, and the choir teacher says, you just lip sync the words, you know, or even worse, you know, you're a parent and your child says, you know, mommy, don't sing, your voice sounds terrible.
Oh no.
And I think the human voice, more than any other instrument, it's such a fingerprint of who we are. Every person's voice is unique and is a mirror of their essential self, that if you hear that you've got a terrible voice, all you need to do is hear that once, and that can really shut you down for the rest of your life.
Right, yeah.
And so a lot of people come to the virtual choir and are able to take this big step because they know that they'll never be heard solo, and that they're joining this big choir. And that's a pretty magical thing. The arc that they go through, starting from never having done this to then, you know, seeing their face up in the virtual choir.
In a worldwide video, no less. Yeah, that's got to be a big boost. Well, I kind of have the penultimate question here from Mark Newcomb. He's one of our NAMM staff members. I don't know if you know Mark, but...
I do.
Okay. Mark shot me a question right before we went on air, and he asked me to ask you if you add your own voice to the virtual choir videos.
I'll tell you, Mark, what is so funny about that is I've tried to join 4 of them, maybe, including the last one.
All right.
And I just can't do it. I listen to it. I'm like, I sound terrible. I can't. And also, I write these really long lines that are almost impossible to sing in a single breath. I try not to, but I just love these long lines. And so what you do when you're with a regular choir is you stagger breathe, right? So that you're singing along, and you just take a breath and jump back in. And when there's a bunch of you doing this, you don't hear the stagger breathing. Right. But when it's you alone in your car, you sound like a dope. And so I've chickened out every single time about uploading my. Isn't that funny? The only one I've ever been a part of, Jacob Collier made a beautiful arrangement of Moon River.
Nice.
And so he wrote to me and said, listen, I need a super low note from you. And so that I could do, one note that was going to be with a whole bunch of other things. So I sent that out to him. That's the only virtual choir I've ever been part of.
That's great. What is your lowest note? Because you said that low D used to be really low. Are you go below that?
Oh, these days
low
it's
D?
in the basement. I mean, especially if I have a gin martini and some cigars. But let's see.
Okay.
Bum, 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 bum. That's an A, right? So that's Russian A.
Oh,
Da,
yeah,
ba.
it is.
Yeah, and if it were late at night and like I say, I hadn't slept very well, I've probably got that G. I don't sound great, but I'm super useful. If anybody wants to do Rachmaninoff Vespers or something, let me know. I'm your guy.
For you, it's martini and cigars. For me, it's beer. But whatever it takes to get to those
Yeah, whatever
low
works.
notes,
Right? Yeah, that's right.
That's great. I've got a question here, Eric, from one of our great volunteers, Rich Skirmahorn, and he asks, and I wanted to talk about this anyway, I'm curious about your experience with the sample library, your sample library. How did making a tool set for other composers contrast with composing your own music, and where did your role end and the Spitfire team take over?
Such a good question. So, yeah, for those of your listeners who maybe aren't so familiar with what a sample library is, basically, you record every note that a singer can sing. So in this case, my choir, all the way from those low Ds and Es, all the way up to high Gs and As with the sopranos, and then with lots of different versions of ooh, ah, e, different vowels and different colors, loud, soft, and it's an unbelievably tedious recording session, where you're just getting every one of these things. You've got the choir standing there. And initially, my role was going to be that I was going to just come for the first day. It's my group of my choir. We've got a professional choir in London, and kind of oversee it, make sure the sound was right, and then I was going to leave. And then what we realized almost from the beginning is that I'm on the podium, and singers, unlike if you take a group of professional cellists, and they've got to play this G, for instance, right?
Right.
You give them a downbeat, and if it says pianissimo on the page, they're just going to play pianissimo. You might want to tweak it a little bit, but it's generally you're just going to get the sound that you've got on the page. Singers, for whatever reason, are so responsive to the relationship between the conductor and each other that we immediately discovered, that the way that I even asked for that pianissimo, you get all of this emotional color, right? Like it might be pianissimo, but there's 50 versions of pianissimo that can be haunting or chilling or warm or nostalgic or melancholic or, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just on a single note. And so early on we realized, oh my God, okay, so I'm going to be here for all of this. So I spent 13 10-hour days with the choir in Air Studios in London. And I say it's tedious, but the truth is I and the singers, it became one of the more spiritual experiences I've ever been involved with. Because it's just this focus, this delicate focus, hour upon hour upon hour, just singing and blending, and you have to be present. You're singing one of these notes, you can't just drift and go do the laundry list.
Right.
You have to be present. And so in that way, it was really gratifying, and a little bit like the virtual choir. I think that somehow that all the intention of those recording sessions made it into the sample library. And that's what I'm most happy with when it goes out to other composers, is that then maybe they can use that and get a little bit of that bottled intention.
Yeah, right.
But then if I'm being selfish, more importantly, it's that I'm hoping that it converts a whole bunch of composers to writing more for the voice.
Yeah. What's interesting is when you were talking about the focus and the concentration and holding that one note, my mind went right back to your earlier topic of your meditation that you used to do. Perhaps maybe it brought you back to that world for a bit.
I'm certain it did. I never put that together, Bill, but it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
It's funny, right? The older you get, you realize there's like 2 or 3 themes in your life.
Right.
And whatever it is, whatever force keeps knocking you in the head with them and saying, will you please just do this? Just, will you please learn this? Learn,
Amen. Long story, which I won't get into, but that's how I ended up being employed by the museum. Life was knocking on my head, and it took me a minute, but I started paying attention. So part of Rich's question was, so you've got the 13 days of recording in the bag, and then what did the Spitfire group do to take over?
I see.
This
Okay,
process?
so then they take hundreds of gigabytes, if not terabytes. I don't remember, but it was a ludicrous amount of sound, and then they edit it very carefully, right? So that all of the tones match, that it's playable on a keyboard, and then they make it into this beautiful product. When you download it and you use it on just the interface is so nice, and so they really. I mean, Spitfire, those guys are unparalleled in my opinion. They just, they're real musicians, you know, and they think like musicians and artists, and they don't leave any stone unturned.
Okay. Yeah. I watched the demo video of a very well-spoken British man giving a demo of it. And as a friend of mine said once when he hired me to go play guitar at his house, this session's going to cost you a lot of money, because he showed me all of his new virtual toys. Well, I watched your video the other day, and I figured this session's going to set me back a few $100 too.
Well, Bill, let me know. If you need a copy of the choir, let me know. I know some people.
I think you do. That's tremendous. Gosh, so much to talk about, and I know we're coming up on the hour. I want to leave us with Sing Gently, Virtual Choir 6. But if you could, in a couple of minutes, can you tell us a bit about your virtual school that you've got coming up in, I believe, July is when that launches?
Yeah, June, actually.
June.
Thank you for asking about that.
Sure.
Yeah, it's over the past year, if I'm honest, I just haven't done that much composing. There's just no blood flowing to the muscle. And I think a big part of that is just because nobody's singing or playing.
Right.
And it somehow just, I couldn't find it. And so in an effort to stay creative, I thought, all right, what I can do is, I'm here in my garage where my studio is. What I can do is finally coalesce 30 years worth of experience and maybe a little bit of wisdom. And so I'm launching this virtual masterclass called The Beautiful Mess, Lessons in Composition and Creativity, because that for me sums up the compositional process, the beautiful mess. And I'm going to make, it'll be long, hours long. So, dozens of videos about every part of my process, how I build a piece from the very beginning to the very end, but also about the philosophy of making music and why we make music and things for composers or creators to think about, ways to think creatively and differently. And I've just started it. I don't know if you can see behind me, but this is all my wife's doing. It just looks beautiful in my garage. And just to my left, I've got all these cameras and lights and microphones over my Yamaha piano. And so it's, I'm gearing up for it.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Fantastic. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I registered. I'm going to tell everybody watching, register for that class.
Thanks, Bill.
And again, all that information is on your website, correct?
Yeah, that's right. If anybody's interested at all in anything, just go to ericwhitacre.com and just sign up, and we'll send you an alert when it's ready, if you're interested.
Let me throw a name out at you, because I studied, my wife and I actually, that's where we met, was in a choir at Cal State Long Beach. Are you familiar with Frank Pooler at Cal State Long Beach?
I never got to meet him, but Frank Pooler is an absolute legend in the choral community. And
yes.
So you worked with him, or you sang under him.
Right, yeah. And because a lot of what you were talking about today, your approach to things, it's so frank Pooler. Very open-minded individual. If you brought an idea to him and he liked it, it was part of the piece that you were working on. And his influence as a mentor, as is yours really, cannot be estimated truly, because so many people have been touched by what he did, by what you've done, and his legacy lives on to this day. He had this very fascinating sound that he created where he wanted you to get the beats out of it, no vibrato. So it was a pure tone coming out of the choir, much like we hear in the virtual choir videos. And I'm just glad that you know of him. And
oh yeah, my God, yeah. Frank is a giant, and we stand on his shoulders. I think, by the way, it's not at all coincidence that Frank was here on the West Coast, and there was a whole West Coast school of people making choral music in this, in the 60s and in the 70s, where there was an awakening in a way. And this kind of California spiritualism, which I joked about before, but I believe deeply in. Yeah. I think there's something special happening here in California.
Absolutely.
And I think that led directly to the composer Morton Lordson, who is just a wizard and a massive influence on me, not only as a composer, but as a person. And so I think there's this lineage of West Coast. John Adams is another West Coast composer, a little further north, but these West Coast spiritualists in a way that and Frank was he was part of that vanguard at the beginning.
Yeah.
How beautiful you got to work with him.
Oh, it was tremendous. Again, his influence on my life as a musician cannot be overstated. Funny, because as I was getting ready to graduate, I could tell he was worried that I had said very clearly, I'm going to jump in the world and try and make my way as a musician, freelance. Bill, have you ever considered being a choir teacher? It's a really good way to go. And, I was young. Nope, can't tell me what to do. I'm going for it. But he was there, all the way. We kept in touch. Really, matter of fact, all the way up until my tenure here with the museum. Unfortunately, he passed away about a year or two into my tenure. But he was just always so encouraging. And again, what you do with your singers, so encouraging, so enlightening, saying, yes, you can do this, rather than, and I know you've run into this, the people that say, why do you want to do that? Or you're not going to succeed with that. That'll never work. Frank was the polar opposite. And
that's the whole thing, isn't it? That's the gift that the great teachers give.
Yes.
Is just the space to explore and that encouragement, which is, it's everything.
Yeah, everything indeed. Are you okay to go over a few minutes, Eric?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Before we get to Virtual Choir 6, I wanted to ask you about your 4-note composing challenge, which again, I just learned about this morning through Claire KB. Could you tell everybody what that is?
Yeah, it's, and I'm going to talk about this in my masterclass too. It's something that I came up with. I call it the 4-note challenge. And the idea is that there's this movie version. I know both you and BJ know exactly what I'm talking about. There's this movie version of what creativity looks like, and especially composition, and it really looks like it's Beethoven at the piano and Sturm und Drang and there's lightning, and then, like Zeus sends down a messenger into your heart and you've been inspired. In my experience, that's not really the way that it works. You get a moment like that once a decade. It's worth it when it happens, but it's not the way it goes. And what I've come to realize year upon year is that it's all about having the tightest possible boundaries and that creativity actually is more about adaptation and invention than it is about these grand original ideas. And so the 4-note challenge is designed to box you in as tightly as possible so that you have to adapt. And it's very simple, that you start with, you pick 4 notes from the scale, right? So let's say any 4 notes. Okay, those 4 notes. What I would encourage composers who are going to try this to do is pick 4 notes that have some meaning to you. Maybe it's a chord that you like, or it's the last 4 digits of your social security number, or the last 4 digits of your crush's phone number. You know what I mean? Like something. And I do this kind of thing all the time, where I'm embedding little messages and personal things into my music. So let's say you've got those 4 notes and you decide on them. Then you're going to wake up at 8:30, say tomorrow on Saturday, and you're going to start writing. And you can use only those 4 notes. Now you can use them any way you like, right? You can. When I did it with Imogen Heap on that NAMM podcast, she was doing, I don't remember which notes she had, but just this really cool kind of ethereal, but just those notes. You start at 8:30, and it can be no longer than 1 minute. Your piece it can be 10 seconds long, but it can't be longer than a minute. And it has to be finished by midnight, no matter what. And the reason that it can be no longer than a minute is because when it's midnight, you're going to upload it to Instagram or to TikTok, which has a 1 minute limit on their posts. You will learn more about not only composition, but about yourself and what makes you tick in doing this than I think you can in years and years of formal composition training. And what you come to realize is that first, why go with your 5th bad idea when you can go with your 1st bad idea? That oftentimes it's your gut is right that way. And that also for most people, if they're like me at all, it's the deadline is what focuses the mind. And it's that for me, it's always that the only reason I ever really start making decisions and locking them in is because the fear of not finishing on time is greater than the fear of starting. So it's a beautiful way to box yourself in and hack the part of your mind that is endlessly criticizing and worried and neurotic, and you just start making decisions, And what's beautiful about the 4-note thing is it also starts teaching you how to make a cohesive composition. That way the composition is the entire thing is cut from a small bit of cloth. And the great artists, and let's start with the greatest of them all, Bach, that's how they do it. They take a tiny bit of efficient material and then let it blossom.
Yeah. Okay.
And then the last thing I'll say about it is the reason that works and the reason why it's so important is because it's reflective of the natural world. This is how the natural world works. A few simple governing principles that manifest themselves at the macro level, at the micro level. And so it's this very spiritual approach to creation that is a pale reflection of what we see in the natural world.
Yeah, I again encourage everybody to watch the video with Imogen Heap. And since I just watched it this morning, I do remember the notes. It was C, E flat, B flat, and A flat.
Oh, I gave her good notes. Yeah, that's right. Because she asked me to give her the notes. Now I'm looking at like it's hard to mess up with it. Yeah, much harder. That's harder. But
Yeah, don't give me that one, please. I do have a question. So the 4-note challenge is to write the melody with those 4 notes. Can you harmonize chordally with any notes, or
only those 4 notes?
You
can
stay within
harmonize.
those 4
That's
notes.
right. So in Imogen's case, right, you could harmonize this. You could let's see. So we're here. So you could right, and then you've got to figure just out a way. Then what is your melody? But you can get unbelievably inventive with a small amount of material if you're present for it, and you know you can't do anything else.
Yeah. And those 4 notes have to me, a very pastoral sound that add to in the. I was hearing it as an A flat. I think she was actually, and you as well were saying it was a C minor, like a Dorian or Aeolian minor is how you were hearing it, I think.
But you heard it as
I was
A
hearing
flat major with
with
a ninth or a second. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, but then that's beautiful, right? So then that takes you down this path, and okay, let's see where I go with this.
There you go. It's like being in the Irish countryside, which is where I go way back about 4 generations. Well, Eric, this has been beyond my expectations as far as education, as far as fun. I mean, I feel like we've known each other for 20 years already.
Me too.
And I would like to finish out today by sharing Virtual Choir 6 with everybody viewing. Sing Gently, written, I believe, during the COVID time. And it was also a NAMM collaboration. So perhaps you could set it up a little bit, give us some information, and we'll screen it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as people are watching this, NAMM was incredibly helpful. They made it possible. And NAMM has been just great over the years, I have to say. While we're all here talking about NAMM, what an organization.
Yeah.
I've been going to the conference for 20 years, but it's only in the last 5 years that I've really gotten to know the entire team and they've become creative collaborators this way. And this was written during the pandemic. And so a year ago, I guess 13 months ago, we all locked down.
Yeah.
And after I think I stood up from the fetal position, 2 weeks later, when you remember, it was shocking. It was
surreal.
And I found it especially shocking in our own little corner of the world because we were hearing that singing and singers were threats, that it could be fatal to get together and sing. And just that, if you'd have told me a year and a half ago that we'd be living this, I couldn't imagine that was a possibility. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, if there was ever a time to make one of these virtual choirs, now is the time. Yeah. And the general idea I got was based on this art form called kintsugi, and I've got an example of it here. Is my video all jagged, by the way?
It's a little bit. I'm trying to optimize as we go along, but I can
so
definitely.
Sorry.
No, it's not. It's fine. I can definitely make out the.
You can see what this is, though. Yeah. So
as this piece together.
So yeah, the basic idea is that it's this centuries-old tradition, and if you've broken a piece of ceramic or a pot that has deep meaning to you, instead of just repairing it with glue and hiding the breaks, you fill the glue with a gold epoxy and illuminate the breaks. And by doing that, it becomes a part of the object's history. You don't try to hide the fact that this terrible thing happened to it. You celebrate it. And in making it more beautiful, or making it stronger, you make it more beautiful. And I thought this was the perfect metaphor for for what was happening to society, that we were all shattered apart and isolated, these little pieces, and that it was going to be the glue of empathy and compassion that would bring us together. So when you watch the video, you can see that general theme of kintsugi being manifested everywhere. And then the piece begins super simply. It's just, and even there, that remember I was talking about the 4-note challenge. Yeah. The entire piece is based on that gesture over and over. And the idea is you've got these two pieces far, far apart from each other, and then the glue of compassion right in the middle of it. Wow. So that just becomes the governing principle of this simple little piece.
Yeah. One quick question, because as you're talking about that, were you thinking in those terms as you wrote it, the glue of compassion, or that came after you heard
No, that very much so. It's the only way I know how to compose is this incredibly intentional, personal, and kind of layered way. Right. I try to always have meta information beyond the music inside.
All right.
The notes.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, here we go. Wow. Jeez. I can't watch that without just welling up with emotion. I would encourage everyone to go and check this out on YouTube and on Eric's website, because we are unable to do all of the credit. There's an amazing length of credits. I assume every single person that contributed to that piece. It lasts. I think the entire video, it goes 10 minutes long, just making sure everybody gets included in that. And I know we have a few visitors here today who participated in that. So I've seen them. I was in Virtual Choir 6. I was in Virtual Choir 6, and then one of our own volunteers, too, Marilyn Shepard. She was like, I did this too. So it's. I mean. It's this vision is so far-reaching, and so it touched so many people. And then, not to shortchange the 60 million plus viewers for the lifespan of all the virtual choirs. It's amazing. So, thank you, Eric. Thank you for all that you do. Continue to be creative and have that grit and have that passion and have that vision, because it is appreciated and it is making a difference. Thank you, Mr. Bill, for leading our conversation, leading the charge today. I love just listening to you guys having developed this rapport that in such in unusual ways, like your vocal coach, your choir coach. That was a fun story. I love that. A lot of wonderful compliments today from our live audience. I think everybody enjoyed this conversation today, so I appreciate it, and I appreciate you guys. I am going to go ahead and take us out. Let's go ahead and see what we have coming up on the horizon. Eric, one more time, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you, BJ. Thank you, Bill, so much. Be well, everybody.
And
Thank you
too. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Well, that was a blast. I loved it so much. What we have coming up on the horizon, we've had so many more wonderful guests. Next week, April 30th, you'll notice this one's taking place at 11 a.m. Pacific time. We have Sugar Ray Rayford, blues and soul singer, a wonderful human. He was actually, I mentioned this last week, I didn't realize this, but he was local here, performed around my neck of the woods in Temecula, was in San Diego with some really stellar bands, and now he resides in Los Angeles, just continuing his amazing career as a blues and soul singer. He's going to be sharing that with us next week. And then following that, Monday, not a Friday, Monday, May 3rd at 2 p.m. Pacific time, we'll have Michael Franklin, a wonderful composer, keyboardist. He has connections with some friends of ours that we've featured here on Mom at Home, including John Anderson. We hope you'll join us to learn more about his career and his contributions to music. Other than that, wow, what an epic episode. I love this one. And I hope you guys had fun too. Thank you so much for joining us. If you want to learn more about what we have coming up on the horizon, please visit our website, museumofmakingmusic.org. We'll be updating it very soon to tell you all about our grand reopening to the public. That's right. The renovation is wrapping up just right around the corner. We're going to be opening to the public June 15th. I don't know why I thought March. It's June 15th. Lots of things are opening up on March 5th. I can't get my months straight. June 15th. So lots of things are happening that day. The Museum of Making Music is planning our big public reopening that day as well. Check back to our website in the coming probably week or two. We'll post all the information about how to get your time ticket reservation, what we're doing, what's new, what you'll discover, and how to get back to the Museum of Making Music. We can't wait to see you again. Other than that, I hope you had a wonderful day. I hope you have a wonderful weekend. We hope to see you next time here at Mom at Home or at the Museum of Making Music. All right, everyone, take care and have a wonderful weekend.